During the 1600s, English speakers established the first permanent British settlements in North America. Regional accents and dialects from different parts of the British Isles were brought to the New World. Colonial settlement patterns shaped the foundation and roots of American English. Spoken English loanwords from America influenced the development of the language. The epic story of the English language in North America is fascinating. Let's learn more from the History of English podcast with Kevin Stroud.
The history of the English language. We're going to look at the spread of English around the world in the 1600s. During this period, England was laying the groundwork for the British Empire that was soon to come. And English speakers were no longer just traveling to distant places around the world. They were starting to make permanent homes there, and they carried their language with them. But they not only took the English language, they also took their specific local dialects. We'll also explore how regional dialects in England shaped the various forms of English that were being planted around the world. We're going to explore the expansion of English into North America in the early 1600s. This represents the early stages of what became known as the British Empire. My focus is going to be on the language and how the spread of the British Empire shaped the way the English language is spoken today. Now, since the early Middle Ages, people had thought of the island of Britain as three separate countries: England in the south, Scotland in the north, and Wales in the far west. People might have spoken of an ancient Britain in the distant past before the Anglo-Saxons arrived, but that was more of a historical term. At the time, no one really spoke of Britain in the way we do today to refer to a common political or cultural entity. But all of that started to change when James became the King of England. He became the monarch of all three regions, England, Scotland, and Wales. So he sought to unify them, and he started to promote the idea of a unified Britain and a sense of common Britishness. It's really at this point that the modern sense of the word British as the collective people of England, Scotland, and Wales started to emerge. To promote his idea of British unity, James even had a new coin minted in which he was identified not as the King of England or Scotland, but as the King of Great Britain. The coin contained a Latin inscription. When translated into English, the inscription read, "I will make them into one nation." He also authorized a new flag to show the unity of England and Scotland. The national flag of England is St. George's flag, a red vertical and horizontal cross on a white background. The national flag of Scotland, known as the Saltire or St. Andrew's Cross, is a white diagonal cross on a blue background. So James authorized a new flag that combined those two. It featured the English flag superimposed on top of the Scottish flag. And in the early 1600s, flags were sometimes called jacks. And by the late 1600s, this particular flag had become known as a Union Jack. And of course, it's still the flag that most people associate with Great Britain. Now, even though James promoted the idea of a common Britishness, England and Scotland had been rivals for centuries and had often been at war with each other. So the English Parliament was slow to recognize any formal union. In fact, the formal union would have to wait almost another century. But it really has its roots here in the early reign of James I. James governed an island in which most of the people spoke a language inherited from the Anglo-Saxons. In England, that language was called English, and of course it had many different varieties. In Scotland, it was called Scots, the native language of James himself. As we've seen before, Scots and English were quite different from each other, but they shared a common Old English root and were mutually intelligible. James and his Scottish courtiers could be understood in London, at least with a little effort. Of course, communication problems often existed within England itself. The people of northern England spoke with a dialect that was different from that of London. In many respects, the northern dialects were closer to Scots than the standard English of London. Similarly, the people in the West Country, in the western part of England, also had a unique dialect. In fact, in this same year, 1605, an English writer and translator named Richard Verstegen published a book that highlighted those regional differences. The book was essentially a history of the English language, and its full title was A Restitution of Decayed Intelligence in Antiquities Concerning the Most Noble and Renowned English Nation. Verstegen traced the history of the language from its Germanic origins, which he held in high regard. He noted that just as the original Germanic speakers became separated over time and developed unique ways of speaking, the same thing had happened within England itself. He noted that people in the north and west of England spoke differently than people in London. And he gave an example which I'll read as he wrote it, with the specific phonetic spellings that he used. Here's the passage. Quote, "We see that in some several parts of England itself, both the names of things and the pronunciations of words are somewhat different, and that among the country people that never borrow any words out of the Latin or French. And of this different pronunciation, one example instead of many shall suffice, as this. For pronouncing according as one would say at London, I would eat more cheese if I had it, the northern man saith, Ess it at mar cheese gen I had it. And the western man saith, Ch'd ate mar cheese and chat it. Lo, here 3 different pronunciations in our own country in one thing." End quote. Now, Verstegen revered the regional varieties of English, and he also revered its Germanic roots. He also noted that a word borrowed in one region wasn't necessarily borrowed in another region, and that contributed to communication problems in different parts of the country. 1605 gave us the first performance of a play that features a modern knight who attempts to mount an expedition to the New World. The play was called Eastward Ho, and it was co-written by Ben Jonson and a couple of other playwrights. Jonson was emerging as one of England's most successful playwrights during this period, and Eastward Ho was largely a response to a play produced the prior year called Westward Ho. Eastward Ho features a fraudulent knight named Sir Petronel Flash who purchases his knighthood. That was a common and much criticized practice at the time. King James sold a lot of knighthoods to his supporters to raise money, and the play seemed to mock that practice. Part of the storyline involves Sir Petronel's attempt to arrange an expedition to Virginia in the New World. In terms of the history of English, the play is notable because it features the first recorded instance of someone saying, "Save your breath," meaning to be quiet. But the play is also notable because it ran afoul of the authorities. Not only did the play contain passages that appeared to mock the king's practice of selling knighthoods for money, it also contained passages that appeared to mock the Scots. In a passage where Sir Petronel persuades several other characters to go to Virginia, he expresses his disdain for the Scots, and he says that he wishes that more of them would leave Britain for the New World. He says of Virginia, quote, "And you shall live freely there, with only a few industrious Scots, perhaps, who indeed are dispersed over the face of the whole earth. And for my part, I would 100,000 of 'em were there, for we are all one countryman now, ye know, and we should find 10 times more comfort of them there than we do here." End quote. The new king apparently didn't like that anti-Scottish sentiment and the implied criticism of his sale of knighthoods. So Ben Jonson and the other writers were promptly arrested. They remained in prison for a few months. Fortunately, they had friends in high places who were eventually able to secure their release. Around the same time, a group of merchants and investors in England were setting their sights on North America. They wanted to launch their own expedition to Virginia in North America, and they sought the king's approval. As I noted a moment ago, that controversial play called Eastward Ho contained a storyline about an expedition to Virginia. The play described Virginia as a paradise, and it was part of a renewed interest in the region during this period. Shortly after James had become king, he negotiated a truce with Spain, which brought an end to the conflict between the two countries, at least for a couple of decades. The agreement stipulated that England and Spain would stop attacking each other's ships, and that opened the way for English investors to establish trading posts in North America without the fear of Spanish attack. Memories of Sir Walter Raleigh's failed settlement at Roanoke had started to fade, and with the Spanish threat reduced, it seemed like a good time to try to put another English settlement in the region. So a group of merchants decided to form a company to fund expeditions to Virginia. And in April of 1606, King James approved the formation of a company to plant new settlements in North America. With the king's permission in writing, plans were soon underway to gather volunteers and supplies to mount another expedition to Virginia.